The untold story of 70-year-old gives birth to twins and her husband divorces her instantly. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button so you don't miss more incredible stories, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's dive in. The morning light filtered softly through the lace curtains of a modest house on the edge of a quiet town. Evelyn Foster, 70 years old, awoke to the familiar rhythm of another predictable day. The small home she shared with her husband Henry was tidy and well-kept, every object in its place, a testament to decades of careful living. The walls bore the muted colors of time, lined with old photographs capturing frozen moments of youth and love, memories of a life that had followed a steady, unbroken path. Evelyn swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet sinking into the plush rug, worn yet comforting. Her joints ached slightly as they always did in the morning, but she had long grown accustomed to the passage of time written in the creaks of her bones. She reached for the silk robe draped over the chair beside her and wrapped it around herself before stepping into the dimly lit hallway. Henry was already in the kitchen, his back to her as he prepared their morning tea. "Good morning," she greeted, her voice warm but quiet. Henry glanced over his shoulder and offered her a small smile, the kind that had become more habitual than affectionate over the years. "Morning, Evelyn." Their routine was an unspoken dance. Henry pouring 2 cups of Earl Grey, Evelyn setting out the breakfast, 2 slices of toast, a light spread of honey, and a small bowl of fruit. They ate in comfortable silence, the ticking of the old clock in the living room filling the space between them. Outside, the town was just beginning to stir. A thin mist clung to the streets, curling around the lampposts as the first few early risers made their way to work. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke, the scent drifting in through the slightly open window. It was autumn, and the trees in the park across the street stood ablaze with reds and golds, their leaves drifting lazily to the ground like nature's quiet farewell to summer. Evelyn had lived in this town her entire life. She knew every street, every store owner, every whispered rumor that passed between neighbors at the local market. Life here was simple, predictable, safe. But safe, she often thought, had become another word for empty. She had long accepted that she would never have children. There had been a time, decades ago, when she and Henry had tried, long nights filled with whispered dreams of lullabies and tiny fingers grasping at theirs. But those dreams had faded, leaving behind an ache she had learned to bury deep. Over the years, she had convinced herself that perhaps motherhood had simply never been meant for her. And yet, no matter how much she tried to silence the longing, it remained, soft but persistent, like a melody she couldn't forget. After breakfast, Evelyn pulled on a light sweater and stepped outside. The brisk air bit gently at her cheeks, the scent of freshly fallen leaves surrounding her. She walked toward the park, her usual morning routine, letting the crunch of leaves beneath her feet ground her in the present. She loved this time of day when the world still felt untouched, when the quiet allowed her thoughts to drift freely. She watched as a mother pushed her baby in a stroller along the path, pausing every few steps to tuck a stray blanket corner around the child's tiny body. A boy, no older than 6, ran ahead of his father, laughing as he kicked up piles of leaves. The sight was familiar yet distant, something she had observed countless times but never experienced herself. She turned away, focusing instead on the trees stretching toward the sky, their bare branches trembling in the wind. That was when it happened. A strange sensation fluttered deep within her, so faint she might have imagined it. Evelyn froze mid-step, her hand instinctively moving to her abdomen. It was nothing. Surely, just a trick of her aging body, an odd discomfort. But as she stood there, the feeling returned, stronger this time. A stirring, a whisper of something entirely foreign yet oddly familiar. Her breath hitched, her heartbeat quickening in her chest. A sudden, impossible thought bloomed in her mind, irrational yet undeniable. No, it couldn't be. A chill ran down her spine, but not from the autumn wind. She took slow, measured breaths, willing her mind to make sense of what she had just felt. Perhaps it was a muscle spasm, a momentary flutter of nerves, but deep down, in the quiet part of her soul that had always yearned for something more, a different thought took root. What if? She turned abruptly, Her footsteps hurried now as she made her way back home. Henry was still in the kitchen, now reading the newspaper, his glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up as she entered, brow furrowed at the sight of her flushed face. "Evelyn, you all right?" She hesitated. How could she possibly explain what she herself didn't understand? How could she give voice to something that logic refused to accept? "I think something's happening," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Henry set his newspaper down and gave her a wary look. "What do you mean?" Evelyn placed a trembling hand over her stomach, her eyes searching his for something. Understanding, reassurance, anything. "I think I'm pregnant." Silence, the kind that stretched and thickened, pressing against the walls of their small kitchen. Then, a laugh. Not cruel, not mocking, but disbelieving, light-hearted in the way someone might react to a child claiming they had seen a fairy. "Evelyn," Henry chuckled, shaking his head. "That's not possible." "I know." Her voice was tight, uncertain, but I felt something real. Henry's expression softened, but there was no belief in his eyes, only gentle concern. "Sweetheart, you're 70 years old. It's just not something that happens." She swallowed, her fingers pressing against the fabric of her sweater as if trying to hold on to the fragile hope that had sparked within her. "I need to be sure," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Henry sighed, reaching for her hand and squeezing it lightly. "All right," he said after a moment. "Let's go to the doctor. Get some tests done. If nothing else, it'll ease your mind." Evelyn nodded, though doubt had already begun creeping in. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe her body was playing tricks on her. But deep down, she knew. Something was different. Something had changed. And whether Henry believed it or not, she was no longer the same woman she had been when she woke up that morning. As she turned toward the window, her fingers still resting lightly over her stomach, a single leaf drifted down from the tree outside, spiraling gently before settling onto the porch. A quiet sign of change, barely noticeable, but undeniable all the same. Evelyn sat in the dimly lit waiting room of Dr. Lively's small clinic, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee from the receptionist's desk. Henry sat beside her, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The room was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of magazines and the distant hum of medical equipment behind the closed examination rooms. A nurse in pale blue scrubs appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Foster? Dr. Lively will see you now?" Evelyn's stomach twisted into a knot as she stood, her knees feeling unsteady beneath her. Henry rose with her, placing a firm hand on her lower back as they followed the nurse down the narrow hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting an almost sterile glow on the white walls lined with framed medical certificates and anatomical charts. Dr. Lively, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, greeted them with a warm smile. "Evelyn, Henry, please have a seat. What brings you in today?" Evelyn hesitated, suddenly feeling foolish. How could she explain something that seemed so impossible? She took a deep breath and met the doctor's gaze. I think I might be pregnant." Dr. Lively blinked, his expression neutral, though Evelyn could sense the brief flicker of surprise behind his eyes. He nodded slowly. "All right, tell me what makes you think that." She described the sensation she had felt, the strange fluttering deep inside her. She spoke of the undeniable feeling that something had changed within her body. Henry sat rigidly beside her, his lips pressed into a firm line, waiting for the doctor to respond. Dr. Lively folded his hands on the desk, his expression thoughtful. "Evelyn, at 70, natural conception is extremely rare, practically unheard of. But let's not dismiss your concerns outright. We'll run some tests, including blood work and an ultrasound, to see what's going on." Evelyn exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you, doctor. I just need to know." The next few hours passed in a blur of sterile rooms, drawn blood, and the cool sensation of ultrasound gel against her skin. Evelyn lay on the examination table, staring at the ceiling as the technician moved the probe over her abdomen, scanning for any sign of life. Henry sat stiffly in the chair beside her, his hands clasped together so tightly, his knuckles were white. Then, a sound filled the room, a soft, rhythmic thumping. Evelyn's breath hitched. She turned her head sharply to look at the screen. The black and white image flickered and adjusted as the technician focused in on a small pulsing shape. That's a heartbeat, Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. Henry jolted forward in his seat, his eyes wide with disbelief. That can't be right. There has to be a mistake. The technician offered a small, stunned smile. I'm not here to interpret results, but there's definitely something there. Dr. Lively will go over everything with you shortly. Evelyn's fingers clutched at the edge of the examination table as a strange mixture of awe and terror washed over her. Henry's face had gone pale, his jaw tightening as if his mind was struggling to grasp the reality of what they had just witnessed. Back in Dr. Lively's office, the doctor leaned forward, his expression a careful blend of professionalism and amazement. Evelyn, the ultrasound confirms that you are indeed pregnant. Silence. Henry's hands fell to his lap, his entire body rigid. That's impossible. Science, logic, this doesn't happen. Dr. Lively sighed. I understand how extraordinary this is. I've never seen a case like yours before. But the evidence is clear. You're carrying a child. Evelyn pressed her trembling hand against her stomach, still unable to fully process the words. A miracle. A mystery. A phenomenon that defied all logic. Tears welled in her eyes as a fragile smile formed on her lips. Henry, however, shot to his feet. No, this doesn't make sense. You need to run more tests. Check for a mistake. Dr. Lively remained calm. We will continue to monitor Evelyn carefully, but I assure you there is no mistake. Henry raked a hand through his thinning hair, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. He turned to Evelyn, his expression unreadable. This isn't possible. And if it is... His voice faltered, the implication heavy in the air. Evelyn's heart clenched. She knew what he was thinking. If this was real, if she was truly pregnant, how? How could this have happened? Dr. Lively interrupted the heavy silence. For now, let's focus on ensuring Evelyn's health. This pregnancy will require careful monitoring, given her age. I'd like to schedule additional tests and an appointment with a specialist. Evelyn nodded, her mind still spinning. Thank you, doctor. Henry, however, remained frozen. The disbelief in his eyes was slowly morphing into something else. Doubt, fear, suspicion. As they stepped out of the clinic and into the crisp autumn air, Evelyn inhaled deeply, trying to steady herself. The town felt different now, as if the air itself carried the weight of her secret. Henry walked beside her in silence, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight. We need to talk. Evelyn's stomach nodded. She could already hear the storm brewing in his tone. A part of her had known this moment would come. But she wasn't prepared for the words he was about to say. The days that followed Evelyn's appointment at Dr. Ford Lively's clinic felt like a waking dream, both surreal and filled with an intensity she had never known. She moved through her home with a heightened awareness, as if the very air around her carried the weight of something extraordinary. Each morning, she would wake before sunrise, her fingers instinctively resting on her abdomen, as if seeking reassurance that the impossible life within her was still real. The house, once a place of quiet routines and predictable comforts, had taken on a new energy. The ticking clock on the mantel seemed louder, the creaking of the wooden floors more pronounced. Every familiar detail now felt charged with an unspoken anticipation. Evelyn found herself pausing in front of the hallway mirror, studying her reflection more closely. Were her features softer? Was there a new glow to her aging skin? She shook her head, chiding herself for such fanciful thoughts. Henry, however, was a different story. Since leaving the doctor's office, he had retreated into an uneasy silence. He avoided conversation about the pregnancy, deflecting any mention of it with gruff mutterings or a sudden need to occupy himself elsewhere. He spent more time in his study, burying himself in books and old records, searching for explanations that made sense to him. Every now and then, Evelyn would catch him staring at her, his gaze clouded with thoughts he refused to voice. One evening, unable to bear the distance between them, she approached him as he sat at his desk, his hands gripping the edges of an open medical journal. "Henry," she said softly, stepping into the room. "We need to talk." He exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face before looking at her. "I don't know what you want me to say, Evelyn. This isn't normal. It isn't possible." She took a step closer. "And yet, here we are." Henry shook his head. "I just need time to process this." Time won't change the fact that it's happening, she countered gently. But I don't need you to have all the answers right now. I just need you to believe in me. He stared at her for a long moment before nodding, albeit reluctantly. I don't understand it, he admitted, but I'm trying. It was enough for now. Despite Henry's struggles to come to terms with the pregnancy, Evelyn found herself embracing it with a quiet determination. She began keeping a journal, filling its pages with her thoughts, emotions, and the tiny, wondrous changes she observed each day. She wrote about the subtle shifts in her body, the strange dreams that had begun visiting her at night, dreams filled with warm golden light and echoes of laughter that had not yet been born. Her world had become smaller and more intimate, revolving around the secret life she carried. She spent more time in the garden, her hands deep in the soil, nurturing the earth as if it were an extension of herself. She spoke in hushed whispers to the plants, confiding in them as she once had with childhood friends. The rhythmic act of tending to life, even in its smallest form, brought her peace. Then, one crisp morning, as she stood among the autumn leaves, she felt it again. A flutter, a movement from within. Evelyn gasped, pressing both hands against her abdomen. There it was, a gentle, unmistakable stir, as if the child growing inside her was reaching out, affirming its presence. A laugh bubbled from her lips, unbidden and filled with sheer wonder. She closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her, grounding her in the reality of this impossible, beautiful truth. She wanted to share the moment with Henry. She turned on her heel and hurried back inside, her heart pounding with excitement. She found him in the living room, staring absently at the fireplace, lost in thought. Henry! Her voice carried an energy that startled him. He looked up sharply. What is it? She stepped closer, breathless. I felt it move. The baby. Just now. A flicker of something crossed his face. Shock, hesitation, perhaps even fear. He didn't move immediately, but Evelyn saw the way his fingers twitched as if resisting the urge to reach for her. Instead, he swallowed hard and gave a small nod. That's good, Evelyn. Disappointment threatened to dull her joy, but she pushed it aside. It's real, Henry. Whether we understand it or not, it's real. He exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I know, he murmured, though the words felt heavy with lingering doubt. She didn't press him further. Instead, she reached for his hand and placed it gently over her stomach. He tensed at first, but then, as if drawn in by the warmth beneath his palm, he allowed his fingers to relax. They stood there in silence, the crackling of the fire the only sound between them. Then, the smallest movement, a tiny flutter against his touch. Henry inhaled sharply, his eyes widening. His gaze met Evelyn's, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something soften in him. Wonder, fear, acceptance. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. We're not alone in this, Henry. He swallowed, his grip tightening ever so slightly. No, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We're not. Outside, the wind carried the scent of fallen leaves, swirling them into patterns that danced like whispers of change. And inside, beneath the quiet glow of their shared moment, the tiniest heartbeat continued its steady rhythm, a promise of the extraordinary journey still ahead. The house had become a battlefield of silence. Each room held the weight of unspoken words, and every glance exchanged between Evelyn and Henry carried an invisible tension. The more she embraced the miracle within her, the further Henry seemed to retreat into himself. Evelyn spent her days preparing for the child in small, tender ways. She folded tiny blankets, carefully selecting soft fabrics that felt warm against her fingers. She found herself humming lullabies she had long forgotten, melodies that had once seemed lost to time. But despite her quiet joy, the growing void between her and Henry gnawed at the edges of her happiness. One evening, as she stood in the kitchen stirring a pot of soup, she heard the front door creak open. Henry walked in, his shoulders hunched, his face pale. He had been out longer than usual, disappearing for hours at a time without explanation. "Where have you been?" she asked gently, keeping her voice even. He hesitated before answering. "I went to see Dr. Lively again. I asked him if there could be another explanation for all of this, if there was some kind of mistake." Evelyn set the wooden spoon down and turned to face him fully. "And what did he say?" Henry ran a hand through his thinning hair. "He said there's no mistake, that everything points to you really being pregnant. But Evelyn, this isn't normal, it's not natural." Her chest tightened. Maybe it's not normal, Henry, but that doesn't mean it isn't real. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. I just don't know how to accept it. She stepped forward, reaching for his hand, but he pulled away. The rejection stunned more than she expected. He wasn't just struggling, he was resisting. That night, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Henry's breathing remained uneven beside her. The baby stirred within her, a soft, reassuring motion that brought her comfort even in the face of her husband's disbelief. The next morning, she woke to find Henry already dressed, standing by the bedroom window with his arms crossed. His face was lined with exhaustion. I need some air, he muttered, grabbing his coat and leaving before she could respond. Evelyn watched him go, her heart heavy. She knew he wasn't just stepping out for fresh air. He was running. From her, from the truth, from something he couldn't control. Henry's footsteps were heavy as he wandered through the quiet streets of their small town. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant chimney smoke. He found himself at the old library, a place he hadn't visited in years. Inside, the scent of aged paper and ink greeted him. He ran his fingers along the spines of books, searching, though for what, he wasn't sure. Something to make sense of the impossible? Some long-forgotten case of a woman miraculously bearing a child at 70? But there were no answers in the dusty tomes, no precedent for what Evelyn was experiencing. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Henry? He turned to see Margaret, an old family friend, her eyes kind but curious. You look troubled. Henry sighed, debating whether to confide in her, but the burden had grown too heavy to carry alone. It's Evelyn. She's pregnant. Margaret blinked, but she didn't react with the same disbelief he had come to expect. Instead, she nodded slowly. Miracles don't always come in ways we understand, Henry. Sometimes they ask us to believe before we see. He frowned. But what if I can't believe? What if I don't know how? She patted his arm gently. Then you risk missing something extraordinary. Her words lingered as he left the library. He had spent so much time trying to explain the unexplainable that he hadn't stopped to consider what it might mean to simply accept it. Back at home, Evelyn stood in the backyard, watching the late afternoon light filter through the golden leaves. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the baby move again. A tiny but undeniable presence. She wished Henry could feel it, wished he would let go of his fear long enough to recognize the miracle before them. As the sun dipped lower, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Henry standing at the porch steps, watching her. I went to the library today, he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. Talked to Margaret. Evelyn arched an eyebrow. And? He hesitated, then took a step closer. And she said something that stuck with me, that maybe I need to believe before I can understand. A small, hopeful smile played at her lips. That's a start. He let out a slow breath. I don't know if I can be the man who just accepts this without question, Evelyn. But I don't want to lose you in the process of trying to figure it out. She reached for his hand, and this time, he let her take it. Then walk this with me, Henry. You don't have to understand it all right now. Just be here with me. He swallowed hard, looking down at where her hand rested against her stomach. Slowly, cautiously, he placed his palm over hers, and there it was again, that same small movement, a flutter of life beneath his touch. Henry sucked in a sharp breath, his fingers tightening slightly. For the first time since this all began, the fear in his eyes gave way to something else. Wonder. Evelyn smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. Do you feel it? Henry nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. I do. And just like that, the walls he had built around himself began to crack, letting in the first slivers of light. The first snowfall of winter had begun to dust the rooftops and streets, casting a soft glow over the town. Inside their home, Evelyn sat by the window, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, watching as delicate flakes danced outside. Her hands rested on her swollen belly, feeling the rhythmic movements of the child within. Each kick was a reminder that the miracle she carried was real, undeniable. Henry, however, had grown distant again. The brief moment of connection they had shared when he first felt the baby move seemed to have faded into the background. He spent more time out of the house, making excuses about errands or work that didn't need to be done. When he was home, he barely spoke, his eyes filled with something Evelyn couldn't quite decipher: fear, doubt, perhaps even resentment. One evening, as Evelyn struggled to stand from the couch, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, stealing her breath. She gasped, clutching the armrest as she lowered herself back down. Henry, who had just entered the house, rushed to her side. "What is it? What's wrong?" he asked, his voice edged with concern despite the distance between them. She breathed deeply, trying to steady herself. I think it's time." Henry's face went pale. "Now? Are you sure?" Another contraction gripped her, stronger this time. She nodded, unable to speak. Henry sprang into action, grabbing their coats and helping her into the car. The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and anticipation. The world outside was dark, the streetlights casting long shadows across the snow-covered roads. Evelyn gritted her teeth, her hands gripping the door handle as each contraction grew closer together. When they arrived at the hospital, nurses quickly surrounded her, wheeling her into the maternity ward. The sterile scent of disinfectant filled the air, mingling with the sounds of beeping monitors and muffled voices. Henry paced outside the delivery room, running a hand through his hair as doubt gnawed at him. Hours passed, each one stretching unbearably long. Then, just as the first light of dawn broke through the windows, the sound of a newborn's cry echoed through the halls. Henry froze. A nurse emerged moments later, a warm smile on her face. "Mr. Foster, you have twins, a boy and a girl. Both are healthy." Henry's knees nearly buckled. "Twins?" he repeated, his voice hollow. He felt an odd mixture of awe and dread settle over him as the nurse led him into the room. Evelyn lay in the hospital bed, her face glistening with sweat, but her expression was one of pure joy. In her arms, two tiny bundles were nestled close to her chest. Their fragile hands twitched, their tiny faces scrunched as they adjusted to the new world they had entered. "Henry," Evelyn whispered, her voice filled with emotion, "come meet our children." But Henry didn't move. His heart pounded against his ribs, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't suppress. This wasn't possible. This shouldn't have been possible. And now, two babies, two undeniable pieces of proof that defied every law of nature he understood. He took a shaky step forward, staring down at them. The girl had Evelyn's delicate features, a softness that mirrored her mother's gentle nature. The boy had a strong grip, his tiny fingers curling around Evelyn's thumb. They were perfect. And yet, Henry's breath came short. His mind whispered doubts, ugly and insidious. How? The word escaped his lips before he could stop it. Evelyn's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" Henry swallowed hard. "How is this possible, Evelyn? How could you?" Her eyes darkened with hurt. "Henry, don't." He took a step back, shaking his head. "I want to believe this is a miracle, but I can't ignore the facts. You were 70. You couldn't have children. And now, twins? Evelyn, tell me the truth. Is there something you're not saying?" Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice remained firm. "The truth is exactly what it is, Henry. I don't have an explanation any more than you do. But I know these children are ours. I know it in my heart." He turned away, his hands clenching into fists. His entire world had been turned upside down, and no matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't reconcile the impossible with the rational. "I need air," he muttered, striding out of the room before Evelyn could say another word. She watched him go, a deep sadness settling in her chest. The twins stirred in her arms, their warmth grounding her, even as her husband walked away from the moment that should have been filled with joy. Outside, Henry stood in the cold morning air, his breath forming small clouds in front of him. Snow continued to fall in soft, quiet flakes. His mind churned with questions he wasn't ready to face, doubts that refused to be silenced. And somewhere, deep in the recesses of his heart, he feared that this miracle would be the very thing that broke them apart. The air inside the hospital room felt unbearably heavy. Evelyn sat upright in the bed, cradling her newborn twins, her body exhausted but her spirit unwilling to waver. The steady beep of the heart monitor punctuated the silence, a rhythmic reminder that life went on even in the face of heartbreak. Henry had not returned since he walked out that morning. The door remained unopened, the chair beside her bed empty. Evelyn's gaze drifted toward the window, where snowflakes swirled under the pale hospital lights, blanketing the town in soft white. A soft knock at the door broke her trance. The nurse peeked in, offering a gentle smile. "Mrs. Foster, is there anything I can get you?" Evelyn forced a small smile. "No, thank you, I'm fine." The nurse hesitated, glancing at the empty chair. "Would you like me to call Mr. Foster?" Evelyn's fingers tightened around the soft fabric of her baby's blanket. No. If he wanted to be here, he would be. The nurse nodded understandingly and slipped out of the room. Evelyn sighed, lowering her gaze to her children. Their tiny hands twitched in sleep, their breath steady. She stroked her daughter's cheek, marveling at the warmth of her skin. Henry's absence was a wound she hadn't expected to cut so deep. He had doubted, he had feared, but she never thought he would abandon them entirely. Yet, as the days passed, his absence remained a stark reality. The first weeks at home were a blur of late-night feedings, diaper changes, and exhaustion. Evelyn moved through it all with quiet determination, her heart both full and aching. The house, once filled with shared routines and familiar comforts, now felt emptier than ever. The twins' cries echoed through the halls at all hours, yet Henry's voice had vanished completely. One evening, as Evelyn rocked her son in her arms, a sharp knock rattled the front door. Her breath caught in her throat. Was it Henry? Had he finally come home? She hurried to the door, hope flickering in her chest, only to be met with the solemn face of a courier. He handed her an envelope, nodded, and left without a word. Evelyn stared at the envelope, her fingers trembling. She already knew what it was before she even opened it. Divorce papers. Her breath shuddered out of her, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. She had held on to hope that Henry would come back, that he would find a way to accept their new reality. But here it was, his final decision, laid out in ink and legal jargon. She sank onto the couch, staring at the papers in her hands. Her fingers brushed over Henry's signature, a stark confirmation that the man she had spent her life with had chosen to walk away from her, and from their children. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't change what had happened. Mourning wouldn't bring him back. She inhaled deeply, then stood, her resolve hardening. She would not break. The next few months tested Evelyn in ways she had never imagined. She adjusted to life as a single mother, finding strength she never knew she possessed. The town, once filled with familiar faces, now seemed to hold whispers behind every corner. People spoke in hushed tones, casting glances her way as if she were some kind of anomaly. "Poor thing," she heard one woman whisper outside the grocery store. Left all alone with 2 babies at her age. Evelyn straightened her spine and walked past without a second glance. She didn't need their pity. She didn't need Henry's doubts lingering like ghosts in the corners of her home. She had her children, and that was enough. She threw herself into caring for them. She learned their different cries, the way her daughter preferred to be swaddled tighter, the way her son calmed at the sound of her voice. She grew stronger with each passing day, her love for them a fire that would not be extinguished. And when she finally signed the divorce papers, she did so with a steady hand. Winter melted into spring, and with it, Evelyn found moments of unexpected joy. The twins' laughter filled the house, a sound that softened the ache in her chest. She spent afternoons walking with them in the park, watching the world bloom anew. One day, as she sat on a bench, rocking the stroller gently, an old friend approached. Margaret, the librarian, her face lined with kindness and understanding. "I heard about Henry," Margaret said gently, taking a seat beside her. "I'm so sorry, Evelyn." Evelyn nodded, watching a robin hop along the path. "I never thought he would leave." Margaret sighed. "Sometimes people can't accept what they don't understand, but that doesn't mean you have to carry his doubts with you." Evelyn looked at her children, their tiny faces filled with innocent wonder. "I won't," she said firmly. "I refuse to." Margaret smiled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "You are stronger than you know." Evelyn took a deep breath, the fresh scent of spring filling her lungs. Yes, she had been abandoned. Yes, she had been doubted. But she was still here. She was still standing. And she was no longer afraid. The weight of regret settled into Henry's bones like an unbearable cold that even the thickest coat couldn't ward off. He had left Evelyn and the twins behind, convinced that what had happened was beyond his comprehension, something unnatural. But in the solitude of his new, lifeless apartment, the silence was deafening. The walls were bare, stripped of the warmth that had once filled their shared home. The small dining table, where he used to sip coffee across from Evelyn in the mornings, now sat abandoned, covered only in scattered mail and unopened bills. The absence of laughter, the sound of Evelyn's voice, the cries of the twins, hollowed out his days, leaving him alone with nothing but the thoughts he had tried so hard to suppress. At first, he told himself he had done the right thing. He convinced himself that Evelyn would be better off without his doubts weighing her down. But as weeks turned into months, his certainty began to unravel. One night, as he sat in his worn-out recliner, a storm raged outside. Rain lashed against the window, the wind howling through the gaps in the poorly insulated walls. Henry leaned forward, running a hand over his face. His eyes flickered to the bottle of whiskey on the coffee table, half empty, a habit he had picked up since the divorce, a poor attempt to drown the ache that never left. Then, almost as if summoned by his own thoughts, he saw it. A photograph. It had been buried under a stack of unopened letters. A picture of him and Evelyn, taken years ago on a summer afternoon. Her eyes had been bright with laughter, her hands gently resting in his as they stood in the garden of their old home. Henry traced the image with his fingertips, something sharp twisting in his chest. How had he let it come to this? The next morning, Henry found himself walking aimlessly through town. The streets were familiar, yet he felt like a stranger moving through them. The people he had known for years gave him polite nods, but there was an unspoken distance between them now. Word had spread. Small towns never kept secrets for long. At the corner cafe, he hesitated before stepping inside. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the buttery aroma of pastries. He ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, watching the world move on without him. Then he heard it, a conversation from the table behind him. "Evelyn looks wonderful, doesn't she?" a woman said, stirring her tea. "I saw her with the babies in the park the other day. You'd think she'd be struggling, but she looks happy, strong." Henry closed his eyes, his grip tightening around the ceramic mug. "It's a shame about Henry," another voice chimed in. "He lost something special. I doubt he even realizes how much." He set the coffee down, suddenly unable to swallow past the lump in his throat. They were right. He had lost something special, and worst of all, he had done it to himself. That evening, Henry returned to his apartment and did something he hadn't done in months. He picked up the phone. His fingers hovered over Evelyn's number, his pulse quickening. Would she even answer? Would she want to hear from him? He hesitated for what felt like an eternity before finally pressing the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then her voice. "Hello?" Henry swallowed hard. "Evelyn, it's me." Silence stretched between them. He imagined her standing in their old living room, the twins cooing in the background, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "Why are you calling, Henry?" He exhaled shakily. I just wanted to know how you're doing, how the kids are." A pause, then softer. "We're fine, we're getting by." Henry closed his eyes, nodding to himself. His voice broke. He cleared his throat. "I miss you, Evelyn, I miss them." Another pause. When she spoke again, her tone was steady, but there was an edge of emotion beneath it. "You made your choice, Henry. We're learning to live without you." Her words cut deeper than he expected. He deserved them. Every syllable. "I know," he admitted. "I was a coward. I let fear drive me away from the best thing that ever happened to me." Evelyn sighed. "Henry, I don't know if I have room for this conversation right now." His heart sank. "I understand. I just needed to hear your voice. To know you're okay." There was another long pause. Then finally, "Goodbye, Henry." The line went dead. Henry sat there, phone still pressed to his ear, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him more than ever. He had taken the first step, but it was only a crack in the wall he had built between them. And for the first time, he wondered if it was too late to tear it down completely. Winter had given way to spring, and with it, a quiet shift had settled over Henry's life. The loneliness that had once felt suffocating was now a dull ache, persistent but bearable. He spent his days going through the motions, waking early, taking long walks through town, and sitting for hours in the local library, reading aimlessly. But something had begun to stir inside him, a feeling he couldn't ignore any longer. Regret had turned into something else entirely, an unshakable need to make things right. One afternoon, Henry found himself standing outside Evelyn's home. The garden, once bare under the weight of winter, now bloomed with fresh life. Lavender and daffodils swayed in the breeze, their delicate fragrance carried through the air. He hesitated before knocking, his heart beat a steady drum against his ribs. The door opened slowly, revealing Evelyn, her expression unreadable. The sight of her nearly stole his breath. She looked different, stronger, as if the weight she had once carried had lightened just enough for her to stand taller. The twins' laughter echoed from inside, a sound that both warmed and pained him. "Henry," she said, her voice careful. He swallowed. "Evelyn, He paused, searching for the right words. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I had to see you. I had to see them." Her fingers tightened around the doorframe. "Why now? Because I can't keep pretending that walking away was the right thing to do. It wasn't. And I've spent every day since regretting it." She studied him for a long moment, then sighed, stepping aside. "Come in." The inside of the house felt warm, lived in. The scent of vanilla and fresh linen filled the air. Toys were scattered near the couch, and in the corner, a wooden rocking chair swayed gently from a recent movement. Henry's gaze landed on the small bassinet near the window, and his chest tightened at the sight of his children sleeping peacefully inside. Evelyn motioned for him to sit, then took a seat across from him. "Talk." He exhaled slowly. "I've spent months convincing myself that I left because I didn't believe in miracles. But the truth is, I left because I was afraid. Afraid of what it meant. Afraid that I wouldn't be the man you needed me to be." Evelyn's gaze softened, but her voice remained firm. "And what changed?" "I did," he admitted. "Or at least I'm trying to. I don't expect you to trust me again overnight, but I need you to know that I see it now. I see them. I see you. And I know I was a fool to ever doubt you." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the occasional sounds of the twins shifting in their sleep. Evelyn looked down at her hands, then at Henry. "They deserve to know their father, Henry, but I won't let you hurt them the way you hurt me." His throat tightened. "I won't. I swear to you, I won't." For the first time in a long time, Evelyn allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, redemption was possible. The weeks that followed were careful, measured. Henry visited often but never overstepped, understanding that trust had to be rebuilt brick by brick. He would spend time with the twins in the afternoons, holding them with a tenderness that surprised even himself. One evening, as he rocked his daughter to sleep, Evelyn watched from the doorway, arms crossed. "They know you now," she said quietly. "They reach for you when you come in." Henry looked down at the sleeping infant in his arms, his heart swelling with a love so profound it left him breathless. "I never thought I'd be a father," he admitted. "I never thought I'd deserve to be." Evelyn stepped closer. "You have a long way to go, Henry, but you're trying, and that means something." He met her gaze, hope flickering in his eyes. "I won't stop trying." She nodded, the corners of her lips twitching into something resembling a smile. "Then maybe we can figure this out together." Henry knew then that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about proving, every single day, that he was willing to be better, and for the first time in a long time, he believed he could be. The evening air was crisp as Evelyn stood by the kitchen window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The golden hues stretched across the sky, casting a warm glow over the quiet town. The house, once filled with uncertainty and echoes of loneliness, now hummed with soft lullabies and gentle laughter. The twins were growing fast, each day a reminder of how time refused to stand still. There was a knock at the door. Evelyn's heart paused mid-beat. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, inhaled deeply, and made her way to the entrance. When she pulled the door open, Henry stood before her, hands stuffed in his coat pockets, eyes uncertain yet hopeful. "Hi," he said softly. Evelyn leaned against the doorframe, her expression unreadable. "Hi?" A silence stretched between them, thick with everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. "I was wondering if I could see them," Henry finally said. "If it's all right with you." She studied him for a long moment. The man who had once walked away now stood before her, not demanding, not expecting, just hoping. Finally she nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." The twins were in the living room, surrounded by a colorful array of wooden blocks and stuffed animals. Henry hesitated at the threshold, his breath catching at the sight of them. He had seen them before, but never like this, never so close, never so real. Evelyn watched as he knelt down, his fingers hovering over the tiny curls of their hair before finally daring to touch. "Hey there," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Do you know who I am?" The boy, Caleb, stared at him with wide, curious eyes, his little fingers reaching out to grasp at Henry's coat sleeve. The girl, Lily, blinked sleepily before nestling against Evelyn's leg. Henry swallowed hard. "I never thought I could love someone so much without even knowing them. But I do. I love them, Evelyn." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Loving them isn't the hard part, Henry. It's staying. It's being here for them every day, even when things get hard." He nodded, looking up at her. "I want to stay, if you'll let me." They sat together that evening, watching the twins play. Henry helped Caleb stack blocks into a wobbly tower while Lily dozed in Evelyn's arms. It was a simple moment, but one that felt like the beginning of something fragile yet important. Later, as Henry prepared to leave, he turned to Evelyn at the door. "I know I can't fix the past overnight, but I want to be part of their lives. And if there's a chance, a small chance that I can still be part of yours, I won't waste it." Evelyn exhaled slowly, searching his face for deception, for hesitation. But she found none. "One step at a time, Henry," she said at last. He nodded, smiling for the first time in what felt like years. One step at a time. As he walked away into the cool night air, Evelyn watched him go, her heart lighter than it had been in a long, long time. Spring gave way to summer, and with it, the cautious steps Henry and Evelyn had taken toward rebuilding something, if not a marriage, then at least an understanding, grew steadier. The twins, now toddling on unsteady legs, had begun recognizing Henry as more than just a visitor. They reached for him when he arrived, clung to his shirt when he tried to leave. And each time Evelyn watched, unsure whether to see it as a blessing or another risk she was taking. One evening, as the cicadas hummed in the distance and the scent of freshly cut grass lingered in the air, Henry found himself sitting on Evelyn's porch. She rocked gently in the chair beside him, her fingers wrapped around a mug of tea, her gaze distant. "I used to imagine this would feel different," she admitted after a long silence. Henry turned toward her, resting his forearms on his knees. "How so?" She let out a slow breath. "I thought if you ever came back it would be dramatic, some big moment where everything just fixed itself." She smiled ruefully. "But life isn't like that, is it?" Henry shook his head. "No, it's slower, messier. But maybe that's how it's supposed to be." They sat quietly for a moment, the weight of their past and the uncertainty of their future pressing in around them. Then Evelyn straightened, turning to him fully. "I need to know something, Henry. What is it you really want?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "To be here, to be a father to them, and to be whatever you'll let me be to you." Evelyn studied him carefully, as if searching for any hint of insincerity. Finding none, she nodded. "Then we take it slow." The days blended into weeks, and their fragile peace grew stronger. Henry found himself more present, not just in the children's lives, but in Evelyn's as well. He helped repair the fence in the backyard, read bedtime stories to the twins, and even joined Evelyn on her morning walks through the town. The whispers from neighbors had died down, replaced by knowing nods and quiet acceptance. One afternoon, while watching Caleb and Lily chase fireflies in the garden, Henry turned to Evelyn. "I've been thinking about something." She arched an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "No, but I'd like to build something for them. A treehouse, maybe. Something they'll remember." Evelyn tilted her head, considering. "They'd love that." Henry hesitated, then added, "And maybe in time, you'd let me build something with you too. Not just a treehouse, but a life." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for his hand, squeezing it gently before pulling away. "One step at a time, Henry." He nodded, understanding that forgiveness wasn't something given all at once. It was built, moment by moment, just like the life they were cautiously crafting together. As the sun set, casting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Evelyn glanced at Henry, a soft smile playing on her lips. Maybe, just maybe, miracles didn't happen all at once. Sometimes they unfolded slowly, like a new season taking root, one warm day at a time. And for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it. Thanks for watching. If you love this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more great stories like this one. Tell us in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share this video with your friends and family so they can enjoy it too. There's plenty more amazing stories waiting for you, so stick around and keep exploring. See you in the next videos.